Hello, I'm Bryan Dean with The Oklahoman, and I'm here with Attorney General Drew Edmondson to talk about Sunshine Week, a national effort to promote open government, which begins Sunday, March 16th. And Drew, I'll start by asking you, why should the average person care about open government?
Well, the most basic principle is that the government belongs to the people. The statement of purpose for both the Open Meeting Act and the Open Record Act contain clear statements by the legislature that the government belongs to the people and that they have a right to know what's going on, whether it's a public meeting or a public document. Every bit of paper is financed with tax dollars, and every meeting should be a public meeting.
Do you feel like this is sort of a fundamental thing with our government and how it's arranged?
Well, it's very basic. If government is going to function effectively, cleanly, honestly, then it needs to function under public scrutiny and in response to public interest.
Now, for those who don't know what your role is and how you all deal with open government, could you explain a little bit how you all do that?
Well, as Attorney General, we issue opinions on occasion on what the Open Meetings Act or what the Open Records Act provide. We have also taken it upon ourselves for a number of years to have seminars all around the state of Oklahoma on the Open Meeting Act and the Open Records Act, explaining to commissions and boards and public officials how those two acts work. And I also sit on the board of Freedom of Information, Inc., which is a watchdog agency on openness issues.
I know you're involved with that group and that they also, there's a lot of public involvement with Oklahoma Press Association, some of those folks, and some of your seminars I know are very popular with the open government people. They feel like it's a very helpful thing. Is that something you guys have really promoted?
We feel strongly about that. From a purely selfish point of view, the more information we can get out there, it cuts down on our workload. There are fewer complaints, more compliance with what the law says. I think avoiding violations of the law is the best course. I'd rather educate than prosecute if that's the choice.
Moving on, there's been a lot of uproar this week about a decision by the Supreme Court to limit Internet access to some court records and take some identifying information out of the printed court records. And I know you've been a little bit critical of that decision. What is your concern with what you've seen from this decision?
Well, I made a statement based on the press reports I'd seen so far that I would tend to agree more with the dissent than with the majority. I've since read the rules that have been handed down. I think some of them are prudent in an effort to avoid identity theft. Some of them may have gone too far. The section that you refer to, Section 5, which deals with Internet access, says at the end that this may be subject to further review, and it doesn't go into effect until June. So I would not be at all surprised if the Supreme Court didn't take a second look at that particular provision.
I know that was the most controversial part. There was some dissent on the court with that. You think they may just reevaluate that and maybe decide to keep those open on the internet before it goes into effect?
Well, it's hard to justify a record that is otherwise open, that anyone can go down to the courthouse and see, not being available on the internet. I don't see the rationale for that, and I think the court would be well advised to take another look at it.
The other part of this decision that is causing some controversy is the identifying information that they talked about. I think everybody can understand why Social Security numbers are probably not a good idea to have out there in public, but you start talking about dates of birth and addresses, and these are the kind of things you can use to identify somebody. And you may have you have how many John Smiths in this state and that have been charged with crimes, and how do you identify one from the other? Is there some worry that it's going to be hard for people to tell? If you're trying to evaluate a potential business partner or something like that and you want to look them up, how do you tell if it's the right John Smith if you don't have some sort of identifying information?
How do you exercise your due diligence?
Right.
It's a clash of interests. I don't think there's any question about that. Identity theft is a huge problem. It's a problem nationally. It's a problem in Oklahoma. And the more data that's out there on people, the easier it is to steal someone's identity. On the other hand, you do have difficulty sometimes in telling one person from another. The court rules spoke to perhaps not putting the entire identifier into the record, maybe just the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, or maybe just the year of birth, which would go some distance toward helping you identify a particular person without giving a con artist all the information they need to steal your identity.
Right. some open government advocates have pitched an idea for an independent open government ombudsman who would be able to mediate and resolve openness complaints, kind of somebody separate from the government that would have authority to deal with that. Is that's done in some states? Is that an idea you think has some merit?
Well, that's something that we've thought about and have discussed with some members of the legislature. We're charged with a lot of education responsibilities on open meetings and open records, but the Attorney General has no real enforcement power. That is not among the laws that we're charged with enforcing. We would be willing to take on that responsibility with direct provision of the authority to do it and the manpower to do it. As it is, when a clash comes, we often find ourselves in the position of representing the agency that has denied the record, because that's our duty, and not having anybody on the other side except the citizen who's wanting to get the information. That's an unfair balance.
So do you think there is a need to maybe have something better there as far as enforcement goes?
I think we could beef up the enforcement side of it. I think that might be helpful.
Speaking of enforcement, violating the open meeting and open records laws in the state is a misdemeanor, and yet you rarely see people arrested for it. It does happen on occasion, but do you think, why do you think it is that you don't see people arrested more often for this? It's a misdemeanor just like any other misdemeanor. So why do you think it doesn't happen? And do you think it should happen maybe a little bit more often than it does?
I think prosecutors start off with the basic premise that most people in government positions are trying to do a good job. They would follow the law if they knew what the law was, and that most violations are through ignorance rather than some nefarious purpose. There have been violations. I know the district attorney up in Ottawa County filed charges. District attorney here in Oklahoma County filed charges against some city council people. But they're rare, and usually prosecutors approach these problems by calling the officials in and saying, okay, here's what the law is. Do you all understand this? Do you have a problem with it? You're not going to be a problem again down the road, I hope, and go on down the road.
Okay, well, Mr. Edmondson, thank you for your time, and we appreciate it, and that's all we have today.